Okay, today we're talking about trees. Not just any trees, these are some of the oldest trees in the Arboretum. I originally thought this would be an easier task because I was like, easy, we just go into the records and we pick the 10 oldest trees. But we don't really have much records before 86, so there's about 10 to 15 years of pretty gloppy records, and so there's about 300 trees tied for the 10 oldest trees. So it was more about picking the ones that we wanted to talk about and made a good tour. So why talk about trees and why talk about old trees? Because trees shape the Arboretum. I personally think that our greatest strength here is our established woodies. And in addition to that, as trees age, some of them don't have that long of a lifespan. Ironically, Bartlett Tree Work Company is here today doing some tree work. So there's always something to think about. It's like looking at these trees, looking at the health of these trees. How long are they going to last? What is their lifespan? Some trees only live 30 to 40 years, while others can live 200-300 years. It completely depends on the species. In addition to that, trees have vastly different growth rates. And so we'll be seeing trees of the same age that are very different sizes, shapes, and we're just going to get to see a lot of different things. And then, Dennis, what's this?
Yeah, so I'm going to get us started by talking about this cutting right here. This is the first plant that JC planted at the Arboretum. When he came here from Texas Tech University, and his colleagues gave him a parting gift at Texas Tech, which he brought here and stuck in the ground. And unfortunately, it got sick, and a few years ago we had to take it out, but we did keep this beautiful slice of it. It's an oak, English oak, Quercus robur, and it was a cultivar that was fastigiate. It's cultivar fastigiata, the columnar English oak. And so we do have, this is the oldest official tree that JC touched. There are other plants we're going to talk about today that are actually older than the Arboretum, and we're going to stick them in, and then we're going to talk about some other stuff as well. We're going to walk around, and Evan and I are going to switch off talking about the plants that we selected. Anyone here know how old the Arboretum is in years? 49 years, right. So next year's our 50th anniversary, and we're going to have a bunch of stuff related to that. So technically, the oldest plants that could have been planted here would be 49 years old. Some of these ones we're going to talk about are older than that because this property belonged to NC State University prior to it being an arboretum, and it was the horticulture department did have stuff here, plants here before then as well. All right, so our first stop, we're going to turn around and go up towards the pedestrian gate, and that will be our first stop. Okay, the first tree, or two trees, there's one on either side of the sidewalk here that we're going to talk about today. They're also oaks. In fact, we could have done this whole tour of nothing but old oaks, but we're not going to do that. We want to mix it up for you. This is Quercus virginiana, the southern live oak. Now, this is a species that you would normally see in North Carolina down on the coast by Wilmington and stuff like that. It's a native tree, but it does not on its own migrate all the way to Raleigh. It will grow. Raleigh's barely hard, it can barely survive in Raleigh. Okay, this is about as far north and west of the coast as you could get this plant to grow. This is the plant that you would see having Spanish moss hanging from it if you've ever been down to Savannah. In the deep south, this plant is everywhere. These two predate the Arboretum. This land was purchased by North Carolina State University in 1936 from a real estate developer. And pretty soon after that, the Department of Horticultural Science started planting things here. So these trees and some of the others we're going to be seeing today date from that era between 36 and 1976 when the Arboretum opened up. So in our records, these are just listed as older than the Arboretum. Okay, we don't actually have a planting date and we've not done any aging of them or anything like that. Beautiful trees. It's a great oak. It's not particularly tall. It tops out at 40 or 50 feet, but it gets enormously wide, maybe 100 feet wide with these long branches that hang way out. It's a great ornamental tree. Now, I want you to notice that this tree is a little bit sick. You'll see these places where the bark is falling off. And if you look, you can see where we've been pruning on it, getting rid of dead branches and things like that. This is not a tree that you want to plant close to a building. A, because it gets so wide, but B, the roots don't tolerate that. And so 20-something years ago, 25 years ago, when we built the visitor center and built and installed this sidewalk, we disturbed a lot of the roots. Okay, this was empty area before then, just the trees and some mulch. And then of course, after that, we went ahead and dug all this up and planted plants too. So these roots have been disturbed, which has kind of knocked this tree for a loop. Now it's our goal to keep this tree around and baby it and try and get it to survive. We will keep pruning it for safety reasons as long as necessary. And actually we are cabling it too in order to keep support the health of this plant. So it is a native, it's native to along the coast, all the way up to New Jersey, down around the coast. You see them mostly in Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi. They go well inland in those parts of the country, but around here, this is a coastal species. So this is our first plant on the oldest plants. It is tour. It is considered, horticulturally, you can consider it to be evergreen. It's not true evergreen in that a real evergreen plant only drops a portion of its leaves every year, and most of the leaves live for more than 1 year before they fall off. This plant, all of the leaves live 1 year, but they fall off in spring right before the new leaves come out. So it's bare, it's bare for a very, very short period of time. But for all intents and purposes, it is an evergreen plant from a design perspective. Any questions? The question was, what are these dangly things from the branches? And they are lights for our Moonlight in the Garden show, which we hold every November. Tickets go on sale in September. Any other questions about Southern Live Oak? All right, our next stop, we're gonna take a left and go this way, and we're gonna kind of go where the old parking lot was, if you know where that is or was. So I bet you thought I was gonna talk about this gigantic oak behind me, but I'm not. That one's been talked to death in other talks. You can go to our YouTube channel and hear me talk about Quercus fellows. But I'm going to talk about this guy here. Not terribly big, right? This is another one of the oldest plants in the Arboretum. And according to my clipboard, it was planted 1980 or a little bit earlier. Okay, so this is Diospyros virginiana, which is the native persimmon tree, okay? And the reason I picked it is it's got this great bark. It's a great landscape tree. It does not get too big. This thing is, 45 years old. It's, it's only about 40 feet tall. It's about at its max height. If it were not so crowded, it would be more of a rounded shape. And it's got this great bark to look at in the winter. Fall color is amazing on it. Yellows, purples, reds, very bright colors. And it produces an edible fruit. And I did see one yesterday. Yeah, right above my head. I'm standing right below it right now. Okay, this is an edible fruit, a persimmon. Now in the American persimmons and our native persimmons, they are sour as all get out right up until the point they're ripe. And then they're delicious, okay? And it takes 1 or 2 or more frosts to ripen them. And so it's actually best that you wait until they actually fall on the ground and they're orange colored at that point. And then you can get them, if you can get them before the wildlife does, and then they will be soft and sweet and delicious. There are other Diospyros that are the Japanese ones, which are probably more popular landscape plants that also produce edible fruit that are, they ripen earlier and are not as sour. They get sweeter earlier, so you can pick them in the fall. You don't have to wait until winter time. This plant is related to ebony, as in ebony and ivory. The wood is extremely dense and is very popular for use in woodwork. This is a very tough tree. It's got a deep taproot, which means that if you get a bigger one, it's not so easy to transplant. But once it's established, it's very drought tolerant and a good tough landscape tree. This is one of these trees that in Europe, they grow the American persimmon more than we grow it in America. A lot of our plants are like that. They're way more into gardening than we are in general. and they take our best plants, improve them, breed them, and then send them back to us at a profit, not even counting tariffs. And so this is one of those. Although there are plenty of beautiful Japanese persimmons that we like to grow here, you should consider the native persimmon as well. By the way, this is the second plant in a row that I've selected that has Virginiana as the epithet in the name. Anyone know what Virginiana means? More or less from Virginia, right? That's not strictly true. That Quercus virginiana is much more common in Florida than it is in Virginia. And this is common all over from, New York to Texas and everywhere in between. It just so happens that the guy who first wrote about this plant in the 1700s collected it in Virginia. And so, it gets the epithet Virginiana from that. So, all right, that's our second plant on the oldest plants in the Arboretum tour. It is been grown in Europe since the 1600s, so it's a very early botanist that collected it and took it over there. Any questions about Diosporos virginiana, the persimmon? It's a dioecious plant. You need both a male and a female. And this is obviously a female because there's fruit on it. And so there is probably a male somewhere nearby. We have other Diosporos species in this area, right back there and kind of over behind this hedge. There are other not Virginiana. And then there's probably Diosporos virginiana, over the fence in the woods somewhere, close enough by to get a little pollen over here. Any other questions about the common persimmon? One of the oldest plants at the Arboretum, even though it's not the biggest. All right, let's go on to our third location. And by the way, we're going to be going close. You guys heard that wood chipper? If you see a tape, don't go under the tape. That wood chipper, whenever anyone goes under the tape, they throw them in the wood chipper. So don't go under any tapes. We have arborists here doing some arbor work. There goes another guest. So we might be going close by it though. All right. All right, the next plant we're going to see is this beautiful plant with the silver trunk here, arching over our heads right now. This is one of the deciduous magnolias. Any of you who know the Arboretum know we have an excellent magnolia collection. And the deciduous ones, they all bloom in the spring, March, April. We get a frost, the flowers get all mushed and they die. This one here is an older one from Arnold Arboretum. And it's the cultivar name is Merrill, M-E-R-R-I-L-L, named for one of the former directors of the Arnold Arboretum. It was selected because it blooms a little bit later than others of this type. This is a Magnolia X Loebneri, a Loebner magnolia. And this one blooms a little bit later than other Loebners, which means that it avoids frosts a little bit better. Okay, it is also more floriferous than a typical Loebner cross and blooms at an earlier age. So it has a lot of things going for it. In March or April, depending on the winter, you will get 5-inch white blooms with maybe with a little pink tinge to them, and they are fragrant. Okay, beautiful. This tree gets absolutely covered. There's no leaves yet. So it is truly totally covered with white flowers. It's very beautiful, but so are all of the deciduous magnolias that bloom in the spring. Loebneri is a hybrid cross. You notice I said Magnolia X Loebneri. It's a cross between the star magnolia, Magnolia stellata, that little one that everyone has that blooms in like February, and a close relative of it, Magnolia cobus. All crosses of those two species are called Loebner magnolias, and then they make selections of especially good ones from that. So according to my clipboard, this thing was planted in 1977, making it one of the earliest plants of the Arboretum. The Arboretum opened in August of 76. So within that first year, this thing was planted. So this is truly one of the oldest plants in the Arboretum today. And that is all I have to say about that. Does anyone have any questions about the Loebner magnolia? The question was, what do I know about the Arnold Arboretum and their relationship with magnolias and how they got here? All right, and I'll repeat that for the camera. So the answers that my colleagues gave, that the relationship between the Arnold Arboretum and the J.C. Raulston Arboretum is that early in the J.C. Raulston's history, the JCRA had zero budget, $0. And so we relied on relationships with other arboreta, and the Arnold Arboretum was very generous with us, giving us plants. So a lot of these old plants have an origin at the Arnold Arboretum. All right, I think it's Evan's turn.
So this above us, yeah, take your time. I wanted to piggyback this right here. Piggyback off that last answer a little bit and just point out how wonderful horticulture is for having the ability to make those kind of relationships, and for just there being so many giving and knowledgeable people around us who are willing to share. I think it's just an amazing place to be, and I feel super fortunate that I've lucked into this industry. So above us is Zelkova serrata goshiki. Goshiki means multicolored, and you'll notice this beautiful variegation on the edge of the leaf. First off, I'll put an asterisk on this plant because Zelkova serrata is one that might be phasing out as temperatures get warmer. However, Goshiki is a cultivar that has Mark's stamp of approval. So Mark has described this one as especially tough and vigorous, especially in the southeastern climate. I'm gonna pass around real quick, and given this rain, I probably should have laminated this, but it's okay. This is gonna be a picture from 2009, and it's just showing how much it's grown in the past 15, 16 years. I think this plant especially does a good job of closing in the white garden, making it such a fine space for weddings. It also gives the space a cathedral feel with how it's tall. It has like a white effect. I didn't even notice the white on it really until you get close enough to touch it and really look at it. And one thing about tree pruning and tree care is that if a leaf like this is interesting, it's good to leave some of these lower branches that make you see like, oh wow, these leaves are really nice. And so you're not just looking at the tree overall, but every single branch can be interesting. So a little bit about this species is that it's very easy to propagate. So Zelkova serrata is the most common Zelkova because of its ease to propagate and propagate from seed, which is why it has the most varieties of any Zelkova. It's Japanese, and it's rumored that some plants planted around Japanese shrines are over 1,000 years old. So hopefully this one lasts that long. That would be awesome. Other than that, the wood was used in Japanese warships and taiko drums. And the bark and leaves can be used in some medicines. And I believe that young fresh leaves are also used in salads. So that's Zelkova serrata goshiki. Lovely plants of the white garden. Any questions? What year was it planted? 1978, I believe. Tight and consistent tree. All right.
So the next tree on our oldest trees of the Arboretum tour is this one here, Fermiana simplex, the Chinese parasol tree. Now, parasol is another word for umbrella, so maybe we should all just stand under it while it's raining. I selected this plant. This individual plant shows up in the records around the year 2000. It was a seedling that just popped up in the Arboretum. And so it probably was born a few years earlier than that, before it got big enough to be recognized by somebody. Its mother was in the bed behind you guys here. And so the reason I picked this plant as one of the oldest in the Arboretum is its lineage, is that this is a Nepo plant. Its mother was one of the older plants of the Arboretum, not this one. Okay, but I picked it because it's always been one of my favorite trees here in the Arboretum walking around. It's got this really cool bark on it, very, very smooth, with the little lenticels on it, with the little green stripes, really cool root flares and roots going along the bottom. If you look up, it's got kind of a chunky, blocky texture. The branches are kind of big and wide, and the canopy is really thick, and it's got really large leaves on it. Just one of the trees that has always caught my eye going by. So this plant is, we'll call it 1998. So 27 years old, not the oldest plant, but like I said, its mama would have been an original. So, and that kind of highlights a point. The reason you don't see this a lot in the trade is it has a reputation for being a seedy plant. This plant here in this location doesn't seed around very much, but clearly it came from a seed from the mother plant. In warmer spots and in sandier soil, this is an absolute weed, and you will have a carpet of Fermiana simplex under every tree. It is not, it's actually considered to be invasive in places like Louisiana, Florida, places a little bit hotter than here. But as we all know, the temperatures are getting warmer, and we will soon be as warm as northern Florida was, 20, 30 years ago. We are heading that direction. So this plant might become a weed here. It has beautiful clusters of flowers, and then the fruit that form after it have kind of that Chinese lantern look. There's a membrane around the fruit. And so it's an extraordinarily attractive plant for a lot of reasons. Not one that you'll probably find in the trade. And if you do, you should probably think twice about planting it, especially at your beach house, okay? And Evan mentioned in the last plant that the wood is used to make drums. The wood on this plant in China is used to make Chinese stringed instruments. So we could chop down both trees and start a band if we wanted to. This plant has bright yellow fall foliage, yet another thing to really love about it. It's just like I said, one of my favorite plants. I kind of had to include it, even though it's not strictly the oldest plant in the Arboretum. Questions? It's a zone 7 plant. So as zone 7 goes north, this will go north. So zone 7 right now would be like what, Virginia? Yeah, up along the coast, yeah, all the way up probably to New Jersey. But like I said, sandy soils, lots of seedlings. Any other questions about Fermiana simplex? Cool name too, by the way. All right, let's move on. Evan's gonna do the next plant right down this path.
Okay, this is Pseudolarix amabilis. So what I've passed out here is in its native range from Zhejiang, China. Photo by Mark Wethington. And then the other picture is from, correct me if I'm wrong, 2009, is that right?
Yeah, 2002.
2002. So just to see how much this plant has grown. And I like passing around the pictures of the trees when it was young, because it gives me a lot of hope when I plant a small tree that one day it'll be a big tree, and that is very exciting. So Pseudolarix amabilis, our people here, Greg, Tim, have noted that this is the biggest one they've ever seen. We got this from the Arboretum in I think we got seed in 1979. I don't know, I think it was planted in 1984. And so Pseudolarix is a monotypic plant, meaning Pseudolarix amabilis is the only Pseudolarix. Pseudolarix meaning semi-larch. So larches themselves, golden larches, are a deciduous conifer, often grown for their fine texture and gorgeous fall color. But larches here in the Southeast get root rot really easily. So instead, we have the pseudo-larch, Pseudolarix amabilis. And this guy is really tough. The only thing is that it doesn't like basic soils. So neutral to acidic is fine. Otherwise, because anecdotally, when it's grown on limestone, it looks just very ugly. Other than that, the other attractive part is these artichoke-shaped cones, which will spread by seed. And so it's least dense. The canopy is least dense in the summer. So that allows us to plant a lot of things underneath it that might like more sun. So it's a very interesting plant to have here in the Arboretum, and I'm glad that we do have it. And those of the Arnold Arboretum are over 100 years old. They have 6 of them. And the other thing, I don't know if I got to it, but it's an obligate outcrosser. So this one, the seeds are usually not viable because it needs to have another individual with which to cross, which is why the Arnold Arboretum is the major supplier of Pseudolarix amabilis in North America. But this could be a much more common plant, and there has been talk of using it as an urban street tree because of its low maintenance and overall beauty. Any questions about Pseudolarix amabilis? How many months in the winter is it naked? About 3. Dennis.
Does it have fall foliage color?
Does it have fall foliage color? Yes, a brilliant yellow. And when it first leaves out, it gets about 2 weeks of that same yellow color. So there is 2 periods of very strong interest for this tree. All right, let's move on up.
All right, so the next plant we're going to talk about are these two pine trees that are above our heads right here. Now, if y'all were to transport yourselves back to 1975, the year before the Arboretum opened, there would have been a line of them, about 15 or 20 trees in a row, and they weren't very big then. They were maybe 8 feet tall. They were a hedge of this pine tree. Now, after JC started the Arboretum, they took cuttings of some and rooted them, which is very difficult to do, by the way, and spread them around, and also dug up some and moved them. So the others, this is a plant, one of the signature plants of the JC Raulston Arboretum. This is a Pinus taeta, a loblolly pine, and this is a dwarf version that we call NCSU dwarf. Okay, now there are a bunch of cultivars of dwarf loblolly pine on the market with names like JC Raulston and this and that. They would have been propagules of one or more of the ones from here, cuttings usually. It's very, very difficult to root from cuttings. It's easier to graft it, but not a lot of conifer grafters down here in the South, and not a lot of people even trying to root this. This is a plant. In the 1960s, there was a professor here, and I have to check my clipboard for his name, Dr. John Duffield, who worked in NCSU's forestry department. And in the forestry department, those guys are interested in growing trees for lumber and also for Christmas trees, at that time at least. And so what he wanted was a dwarf loblolly pine to see if he could grow it and use it as a Christmas tree back in the 60s. The Christmas trees we mostly use today are grown up in the mountains, not a huge area of North Carolina. But loblolly pines grow absolutely everywhere. And so if he could have gotten a loblolly Christmas tree, that would have been pretty awesome. What he did, he was going around looking for this structure called witch's brooms, which are these genetic mutations caused by, well, a variety of things, viruses and diseases and things. And they're little contorted areas of dwarf growing material where the whatever is making the plant, I will hesitate to say sick, whatever's causing the witch's broom is causing weird hormones, and it's causing a lot of dwarf congested growth. And so they found one in a loblolly pine up in Virginia, and they took a shotgun and shot it out of the tree. It had cones on it. They shot the cones out of the tree and grew them from seed and planted a hedge of them right here. I've got pictures in the JC Raulston Arboretum photo database of it as a hedge with 1970s era students planting these other conifers around it. So this is a little bit older than the Arboretum, 10 years or so older. This guy had all these seedlings of these really cool dwarf loblolly pines, and some of them ended up here in the Arboretum. Now, a normal loblolly pine, it can, with age, can be 100 feet tall, and these are more like pygmies, not true dwarfs. They have grown to be less than half of that, but they have this nice not multi-trunked, but low-branched habit and a nice round crown. It's a very beautiful tree. You will see 15 or so of these around the Arboretum, near the Lath House and over by the yurt and other places, and they all have this same beautiful habit. So let's see. That is all I wanted to say about that plant. So any questions about the dwarf loblolly? Do these produce cones, and are the seedlings off of them dwarf? And the answer is about 20% of the seedlings are dwarf. They've retained whatever genetic weirdness that caused their parents to be this shape. But this is rare, and not a lot of people are propagating it, but we certainly could try. And we have once or twice collected seeds or gotten someone to graft some for us and have distributed them through various programs. Yeah, okay, Pat McCracken of Garden Treasures Nursery in Zebulon has recently, within the last year, sold a dwarf version of this. I think it was probably propagated off one of these. I don't know the exact parentage of it though. And it was like $100. It wasn't cheap, but that just, it's, what do they call that? Supply and demand, right? Sure, yeah, with a smaller lot, a smaller pine tree is a good thing. And it's got a beautiful round shape to it. The ones that are out in the open, you can really get a good sense of that form. And it's too bad we never could get one that was small enough to be a Christmas tree. I think that'd be kind of cool. Any other questions about the NCSU dwarf loblolly pine? All right, let's move on. We're going to go this way.
So what we're looking at here is Hymenopterus henryi. And this plant has a very cool story. So Hymenopterus henryi, Hymenopterus meaning not fairy wing.
Forever winged?
Forever winged, that's right. So it's forever winged, and henryi comes from Augustus Henry, who was a medicinal plant collector in China in the late 1800s. So he found this in 1896, but it wasn't popularized until 1907 when Ernest H. Wilson was going through the Chinese forest, and he called it the most spectacular plant he'd ever seen in the Chinese forest. And so with his popularity, this set off everybody. So everybody in Europe had to have one of these. Every major garden had to have one of these. And so, but then there was nothing. So he talked about this in 1907. The first plant to flower was in 1971. So over 60 years after he had mentioned it, the first plant in Italy flowered. And then the second plant flowered in 1986 in Britain, I believe. And so they were like, well, that was a lot of hullabaloo for almost nothing. It took 60 years to get this to maturity. And so in China, it takes about 30 years to get to maturity. Eventually, this was brought to North America and especially the Southeast, and our conditions are a lot more like China. And with our even longer growing season, with our warm days, this, I think, got to maturity in 16 years. So once this was introduced to the Southeast, it was a little more reliable. This doesn't flower for us every year, so it's nice, and I wanted to talk about it because it's flowering this year. It probably flowers every 2 or 3 years. So it's a great, oh, it smells good. Yes, you're right. And we're going to go over here. There's one little sucker with a little flower. So we can sniff that on the way past. Also, recently, it's been introduced into the Pacific Northwest, where plants have reached maturity in as little as 6 years to flower. So there is potential to make a smaller, more dense Hymenopterus henryi that flowers and has a wonderful smell. And so that's the story of how a Chinese plant came here, and it's still not popular. There was a place in 1989 that would sell it, Home Place Gardens, but since they closed down, almost nobody sells Hymenopterus henryi. And that's the story for a lot of Arboretum trees. They're so cool and just can't find them. So maybe one day. Oh, additionally, we'll get to that in 1 second. This does have a native relative, Pycnia, which has pink bracts, and there has been talk of crossing this onto Pycnia. So that could give us some more potential for propagation. Questions, Marilyn?
Any fall color?
Any fall color? Not really, not notable. All right, as we pass this way, we can smell this little flower, see if it's giving us anything. So, since it's raining here, I'm going to be relatively quick with this one. But this is a loquat. See this big leafed thing here? I should have brought my pruners and taken some off for you because it has a lovely fuzzy underside to the leaf, and that can also be seen on the flowers and fruit. So a loquat. Raise your hand if you've ever had a loquat. Nice, a couple of you. That's great. So warming temperatures, bad thing, yeah. But if winters get more mild, then we'll get more fruit set on this guy. So there's a trade-off. So loquats need a little bit of chilling, but they don't handle frost because what it is it's flowering over winter. And so when the flowers freeze, they'll just fall off and die, and they won't end up producing fruit in spring. Other than that, this is Arboretum coppertone, which is a cross between Arboretum the loquat and Indian hawthorn. And it's the most popular cultivar in North America because it just does reliably well for us here. This is about max height. You can see it getting eaten by this other tree a little bit, so it's not too vigorous, but this is max height. It's probably gonna give us another 10 years of looking good, and then it's gonna start to fade and we'll have to take it out. But that's a 40-year-old loquat tree here in North America. So, yeah. Any questions before we move right here?
Is this the one underneath? It seems like there's two.
Yes, this large leafed with the silver new color, and there's also, it's copper tone because the undersides are copper.
Ever seen any fruit on this one?
I've never seen edible fruit. We get some fruit, but it never reaches maturity, right?
I don't know about this one, the loquat that they have at Plant Delights. I used to work there, and it produced edible fruit once or twice during the 10 years that I worked there.
Very rarely will it produce edible fruit. All right, let's move on.
All right. One of the signature plants of the J.C. Raulston Arboretum is a crepe myrtle cultivar called Fantasy. This is not Fantasy. I'm going to get to this one in a second. But Fantasy has its origins in the 1950s. There was a United States National Arboretum trip to Japan where they collected seed off of a Japanese species called Lagerstromia foriae. Some of those seed made their way to this property prior to it being an arboretum. And we had 6 or 7 plants planted out in a row. And then after it became an arboretum, we moved them around a little bit. And one of those was selected to become the cultivar Fantasy, which is one of the trademark plants of the Arboretum. This is Son of Fantasy. Okay, this is from a seedling off of Fantasy. In the 1980s, J.C. Raulston, we mentioned earlier, there was zero budget, so he had students do all the work. As part of their classwork, they would come out here and actually transplant big plants, learn how to ball and burlap and design and build gardens. And this garden here, the townhouse garden, was built in the 1980s by JC's students as a small scale garden you might have if you owned a townhouse. Okay. And he let them, there was a bunch of seedlings of Fantasy underneath the tree. And he let them pick what they thought was the prettiest one and plant it in here in the townhouse garden. And they picked this one and they called it Townhouse. That's the cultivar name. And they selected it because Lagerstromia foriae is known for having this beautiful bark that peels off every year, and the fresh new color is extraordinary. This one has a more, what they're calling a chocolate cinnamon color than Fantasy does. So it's a slightly different color, darker, and in their opinion, prettier. And we talk about Fantasy to death. And it is, and it could be one of the plants we talked about on this tour with the oldest plants in the Arboretum. But I wanted to talk about Son of Fantasy Townhouse. And so this plant dates from the early 1980s. Any questions about Townhouse? Lagerstromia foriae. It's a Japanese species. It's one of the parent species used in a lot of the hybrids we have today. This is a white flowered plant, very, very large compared to most crepe myrtles. You cross it with indica, which is the shorter plant, more brightly colored. And what you end up with are larger plants. This one's disease tolerant, more powdery mildew tolerant, more so than indica is. So you get powdery mildew resistant, colorful crepe myrtles that tend to be on the larger side. Yes, this plant, besides the bark and besides the white flowers, thank you, does it get good fall color? And the answer is yes. Beautiful yellows and oranges on Lagerstromia foriae. Excellent fall color. This is from Japan, Yakushima Island. It's hardy into zone 6. Less so than Fantasy, but you can find Lagerstromia Townhouse in the trade sometimes at some places. Try what's that nursery on New Bern Avenue? Taylor's. Try Taylor's, they might have it. Try Garden Treasures, they might produce it every now and then. I did actually Google this yesterday preparing for this lecture, and I did find it for sale in a few places online mail order as well. Any other questions about Townhouse? All right, let's move on to our last plant, and Evan's gonna talk about it.
This is Cainanthus retusus, the Chinese fringe tree. So what's special about this tree is that it has the heaviest flower set we have probably ever seen. I'm gonna pass this around. This is the flower show in 2008, and we got just as good of a one this year. This coincides with high school formal, so people will come here and take pictures in front of this big white backdrop. So this is full grown. The only maintenance we need to do to this tree from now on is every 3 years, it grows down to the ground, so we have to limit back up. And I just did this again this year. And if you come a little bit, you can see it there, is this beautiful bark and structure. It's all scraggly. It's a lot like the persimmon tree in terms of that attractive bark. So a flower show that completely covers the foliage, and it leaves out much earlier than our native Cainanthus virginicus. This is a great plant. This was planted in 1979, and it's reached its mature size, and it's expected to live 100 years. So we just get to enjoy hanging with this guy. He's going to look like this probably for the next 50 years if all goes well. I think that's all I had to say about that. We got it from Cridler Nursery in Texas, and Cainanthus means snowy flower. Dennis, question.
Does it have fall foliage color?
Oh, it has great yellow fall foliage. Thank you. The question was, does it have fall foliage color? The answer is yes. Any other questions? Marilyn?
So why plant this one instead of the native one?
Because we think it's more attractive. Other than that, we plant everything. The flowers, yeah. But, of course, plant both if you have the space, right? But in terms of attraction, this one is more attractive. In terms of native benefit, you might go for the virginicus. It's larger as well, yes. All right, well, if that's all, thank you guys for joining us on this tour of the oldest plants of the Arboretum. Hope you learned at least one thing and that you didn't get too wet. But yeah, always think about your trees and how long they might last and how big they might get. Lots to think about, lots of diversity in trees, and they're great plants. And it made us who we are today. So thank you. Oh, there's a dwarf pine right behind us too. Lots of good ones.